This is a 1994 Honda Accord, and it is one of the Hondas made during their golden age, and this one is in pristine condition with the little mods. Today I'm going to show you just that, and then I'm going to review it. Now before I get started, make sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my new online car enthusiast auction website at carsandbids.com. If you're looking to buy or sell a cool car from the modern era, the 80s, 90s, and 2000s and up, check out Cars and Bids at carsandbids.com. I've borrowed this car from none other than my dad. See, my dad bought this car new when it came out in 1994, and it's been passed down to me. And before I get started with the review, I'm going to go ahead and start with a little overview. Now, the Honda Accord has been around for quite some time now, ever since the 1970s, and it is one of the most popular cars in the US. This is the 5th generation. So technically, this is the first year of the 5th gen Honda Accord. Now, you can get a variety of body styles of this Accord, one including a coupe, a wagon, which is pretty cool, and this one, a sedan. This Accord is kind of cool, and it still is by modern standards. And today, I'm going to check it out. First, I'm going to take you on a tour of this car and show you all of its quirks and features. And then, I'm going to get it out on the road, drive it, and then I'll give it a Doug score. I'm going to start the quirks and features of this car with the styling. And what I want to point out the most is the color. I think the color of this car is very good. It actually, you don't see many colors like this on the road. It's a match-light green pearl, and it's a pretty good color. Okay, next up I want to move on to the wheels of this car, which is this 6-spoke stainless steel rim. Now, in my opinion, these look really good. They really fit the car. Now, originally you could have got some steelies with some hubcaps, but this, in my opinion, looks way better. It really transforms the look of this car, and it makes it look pretty smooth. Next, we move on to the trunk of this car, which is probably one of the highlights. As you can see, one of the mods that this owner's put to it. A aftermarket stereo system held together by a piece of rope. Yeah. As you can see, this owner has quite some taste. Next, we move on to the bottom of this car, and you can see we can actually open the trunk to reveal the under compartment. And with this, you can see a couple of stuff that came with the car, and some tools. Now, as you can see, it also came with a spare tire. This is a human hand in comparison. This spare tire is pretty pathetic. You wouldn't want to be stuck on the road with one of these for more than a few days. So at least do have a spare tire. Now, I will say that this trunk is pretty big. You can fit a lot of stuff back here. This is very practical, very simple trunk. Now, you can also notice that there's some storage here too as well. Now you can see you can turn this and it reveals the backlight assembly. Nothing too unusual here. But if you open this one, you will see a little bit more. Now, if you look closely, this is actually a jack. Yes, your 1994 Honda Accord came with a jack. Pretty cool. Like I mentioned before, this car came with a few mods, one of them being this thing. Let's start up the car and see how it sounds. Alright, moving on to the front of this car, you will see some of the owner's mods. Starting off with this bra. This right here adds 5 horsepower. As you can see, there are also some triangles here. That adds 10 pounds of downforce. Yes. Another one of these exterior mods is this front grille, which has the badge deleted. And it's actually, I think it fits the car pretty nice. And moving on to the lights over here, these are actually not functional, but they do look pretty good. Like many Hondas in this era, everything was functional, and that was pretty much it. They did everything you needed to do. Speaking of functional, this Accord was fitted with a 2.2 liter 4-banger, producing around 120 horsepower. But if you wanted a little more power, you could go with the EX, which had VTEC. For all you VTEC boys, that added about 10 extra horsepower in the high RPMs. Pretty good. Now, 120 horsepower doesn't sound like a lot, but once you find out that this car weighs only 2,700 pounds, which is about as much as a Subaru BRZ, you find that this is a pretty light car. You don't need much power to have fun in one of these. In the later model years, you could go with a V6 with 170 horsepower and a little more torque. The V6 didn't, however, come with VTEC, but it was a solid 40 horsepower increase, which this car kind of needed because of the great handling characteristics and the ease of driving. Now, something else I found interesting about this car is the brake setup. The front wheels of this car has disc brakes. However, the rear has drum brakes. Now, you could remedy this with the 4-wheel disc brake option, but unfortunately, this owner didn't feel like it was necessary. Now I will show you the inside of the Honda Accord, which is nothing surprising. You have this spacious interior with this tan seats, with a pretty clean dashboard with the optional carpet. Next, I want to talk about the door panel on the Honda Accord. And nothing too surprising here, it's pretty simple. But I do want to talk about the automatic window situation. Honda only thought you needed to automatically roll down your windows down. But the funny thing here is, if you want to roll back your windows up, you can't do that automatically. You have to push the button all the way for it to close. Great thinking, Honda. Now, another thing that was kind of cool, that this car came with power mirrors. Yes, you could power adjust your mirrors. And also, there's a little storage in this area where you can put some napkins or your baby oil. Now, you can also notice the speaker over here. You may notice, what the heck is this? But this is actually not factory. This was actually put on by the owner for better sound, which this car has pretty good sound thanks to that big old subwoofer in the back. Speaking of aftermarket things on this car, we also have an aftermarket head unit. Now, the original head unit didn't come with Bluetooth, which this one does have to modernize the car, but I won't count that as a feature at the end of my Doug score. This car also came with a cigarette lighter, Just push it in and wait for it to light. And when it is done, it will click. And you are ready to smoke your blunt in your 1994 Honda Accord. I bet your mom's Audi doesn't have that. Now you will also notice that there is an ashtray where you can put your smoke from your blunts after a hotbox session with the homies. Now I want to talk about the transmission in this car. As you can notice, it is an automatic, a 4-speed automatic. Now you could have gotten a 5-speed manual, which is highly desirable nowadays, but this owner didn't want that. But at least you have your manual e-brake. Pretty nice. Next we move on to the gauge cluster, and as soon as you look at that gauge cluster, you notice this protrusion. What is that? Well, that's the microphone. This is also aftermarket, if in case you have a call. The gauge cluster in this car is pretty simple, very retro looking. You have 2 big old gauges reading your speed, and if you can look, it says 140 miles per hour. And if you know this car, it won't be going anywhere near that. Now, I don't know about you, but I've always loved these old school gauge clusters, and especially with the blue lights, which I will show you at night. Next, we move on to the climate control. As you can see, this car indeed has air conditioning. Pretty basic stuff here, nothing notable, just everything you would expect from a Honda Accord. Everything is functional, the buttons feel nice. You could expect nothing less from your Honda Accord. Now another feature in this car is cruise control. This car actually did come with cruise control at the time, but this car, however, it does not work, unfortunately. But you can cruise at 70 miles per hour without your foot on the gas. And there's also a little bit of storage back here too. You can put your coins in here, and you can also notice this button. It will adjust your lights. Pushing this, turning for less bright, more bright, less, more, less, more. Now this car also came with 2 cup holders. Just push that, lift it, and you can store maybe a water bottle. Shown. Nice little cup holder. Pretty good. Another interesting thing on this car, which your Nissan Versa probably doesn't have, is mirrors. Pretty small, but it's there. That's what she said. Next, we move on to the steering wheel of this car. As you can see, there are 2 horn buttons located on both sides of the steering wheel. Now, the thought here is, you're probably driving an F1 car and you need to get someone's attention really quick. Fear not, your thumb is right there. Now there are also some buttons on the steering wheel for your cruise control while you're going 70 on the highway. Pretty cool. Next we move on to the glove box. The glove box actually has some pretty decent space. Nothing less that you would expect from a Honda Accord. In the glove box you'll find the owner's manual, which is about 240 pages long for a Honda Accord. Now about the owner's manual of this car, I found something really interesting. You will see it talk about how you can operate your automatic transmission like a manual transmission, but you could have gotten the manual transmission for technically less money. So the seats in this car are very comfortable. I've driven in a lot of cars, and I'd say these are my favorite. Although they aren't really bolstered for spirited driving, they do offer a good amount of support. And you can adjust from the bottom here with this little latch up and down, or you could go sleep in your Honda Accord by tilting it back. That's the spot. Now I will say you can also adjust the height of the seats, like your driving position, if you want to go lower or higher, but that's only available in the higher trim EX model, not the LX. Alright, next we move on to the back seat of this Honda Accord, and you will notice it's pretty bare bones in here. There's a little bit of storage. There's a lot of great space back here, honestly. I am 6'2" or 6'3" on a good day, and I have some pretty good headroom. This afro adds 2 inches, so I'm technically 6'4". Now you will also notice that there is an ashtray. Simply undo that, and there is your ashtray for your homies smoking the booth. Now another thing you may have noticed about this car is the interior lights. They're actually blue, and this is actually unfortunately not factory, but it does look pretty nice, and it matches the color of the exterior. And so there you have it. Now that I've shown you the quirks and features of this car, now it is time to get it on the road and see how it drives. Alright, driving the Honda Accord. You know, for being such an old car, the ride is just very comfortable. No complaints on that. Now I will say, at a stoplight, you know, it is pretty shaky, and you hear a little bit of rattles, but you know, I think that just adds to the character of this car. So far, the driving experience, you know, the throttle is very responsive. Like, as soon as I get on the gas, it's immediate. Like, most cars nowadays, they don't give you the feedback that mechanical throttles give you. You know, they're really vague. They don't give you the right feel. This just feels perfect. The brakes are a little squishy though. This has, like I said, front disc brakes and rear drum brakes, so that it's not ideal for a sports car, but you know what? You're not getting a sports car with the Honda Accord. You know, it's kind of surprising. You don't see cars like this on the road that much, like this generation. It's pretty rare, especially in this color, so that makes it even more special. But I find myself seeing like Camrys of the same year more often than the Honda Accord, which is pretty interesting, given that this car is pretty reliable. I'm not really sure why it's not on the road more. Then again, there are one of the most stolen cars, so alright, I'm gonna roll down my windows to get that full fart can exhaust experience. Guys, there's a tunnel coming up, my favorite tunnel. See these little trees? Alright guys, we're approaching another tunnel. Nice! But the fact is that, you know, these cars are kind of slow, and after driving other cars like a Corvette and my sister's Civic and Man's Civic, you know, this is terribly slow in comparison, but I guess the driving experience and the sound makes up for it. Although this car is pretty slow, like I mentioned, the handling makes up for it, I think. Look at that. The steering, although it's not precise, it's really gives you a lot of feedback. Like, you can really feel the road in front of you. You just have to drive it to know. It makes you appreciate the rawness of these old cars. The D-Pack is out. I don't know if you can see. Right there. And that's the 1994 Honda Accord. Now, there are not a lot of cars on the road that make you feel this connected to the car. And this is a very good example of it. Now, although it's not a sports car, it's still, in my opinion, a driver's car. And the interior is pretty solid as well. Like I've said, you get everything you need and nothing more. Very simplistic approach, but it works. Now that I have driven it and given you a tour of it and shown you its quirks and features, now it is time to give it a Doug score. Starting with the weekend category in styling, this car always looked pretty good in my opinion. The wheels fit perfectly, but it's nothing special, and it gets a 4 out of 10. Acceleration, it goes 0 to 60 in about 9 seconds, and it easily earns a 1 out of 10. Handling is pretty good. The car is tossable, but it's no sports car, and it gets a 4 out of 10. Fun factor is pretty average. The car doesn't have much power, but it makes up for it with its nimble handling, and it gets a 4 out of 10. Cool factor, in my opinion, is better than average. This isn't your typical Honda Accord. Finding one of these in this color and wheel set with some tasteful mods is pretty rare nowadays, and it earns a 6 out of 10 for a total weekend score of 19 out of 50. Next up are the daily categories and features. This car only has what you need and nothing more. It even lacked ABS. And at this point, this car is pretty outdated and it earns a 2 out of 10. Comfort is pretty good. The seats are really comfortable and snug, but it's not quite up to par with, say, a luxury car. And it earns a 4 out of 10. Quality is fine. These cars are known for long-term reliability, but the materials aren't the nicest in the world, and it earns a 6 out of 10. Practicality is strong, and they call this the grocery getter for a reason. 3 back seats and a pretty big trunk, and it earns a 6 out of 10. And finally, value. Now, these cars are going for $2,000 and even $1,000, and that's pretty good considering what it can offer. It's a reliable Japanese sedan with a pretty good aftermarket, and it earns a 6 out of 10 for a total daily score of 24 out of 50. Add it up and the Doug score is 43 out of 50, which places it here with some other similar cars. I would have nothing else to drive as a daily than this car. I was absolutely thrilled to record this review, and I hope to record more in the future.